Welcome to the beautiful island of Boracay. Today we have an updated list of requirements to enter Boracay. There's going to be foreign travelers coming to this beautiful island. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the current requirements. They're subject to change, however, but today we're going to talk about it. Fully vaccinated applies to both the Filipinos and the foreigners, the foreign nationals coming to the Philippines. The travel restrictions have eased for the Filipinos yesterday on February 1st, and in about 8 more days on February 10th, the restriction will allow the foreigners, the foreign nationals with the visa countries to enter the Philippines. You must have a passport that's valid within 6 months of the expiration date. So you don't want to travel if it's under 6 months or around 6 months. You want to make sure you renew your passport so it has a longer expiration date. If you're a foreigner coming to the Philippines, you must have the proof of the double doses of the vaccination, which means the WHO card. You must have the national or state certificate from the country that you're coming from. Foreign government must accept the Vax Search. USA, Canada, and Australia is included in that list. So you must do your homework a little bit and check and make sure that your vaccine card is accepted in the Philippines. Also, another clarification on the travel to the Philippines, which is a good one, because a lot of us were under the impression that the RT-PCR test was needed to be 48 hours to get to the Philippines. However, that's not correct. The RT-PCR test is 48 hours from the last port to entry into the Philippines. For example, if you're flying from Los Angeles International Airport and you're flying Philippine Airlines from LAX to Manila, you must have that particular RT-PCR test within 48 hours. 48 hours from leaving that point of destination. Also, if you're traveling, let's say you're going from Texas to Utah and then to the Philippines, you don't get that RT-PCR test in Texas, you get it in Utah or Los Angeles, wherever the flight leaves to go to the Philippines, wherever that is, you get it at the last stop before you fly to the Philippines. When you arrive to the Philippines vaccinated, there's going to be no more quarantine. You don't have to go to that hotel in Manila, stay for 14 days. There's no quarantine at all with a vaccination. What you need to do is you need to go to your place, your home. You need to self-quarantine for 7 days. And I'm not sure if that's monitored or not, but you should self-monitor yourself. Some people ask, what's the difference between self-monitoring and quarantine if you have to go home? Well, the difference is the quarantine is where you have to go and you have to stay in a hotel and you have to be quarantined. And the other one, the self-monitor, you just go ahead and you have to check and see how you're feeling, and you have to stay at home for the 7 days. On February 10th, there's going to be vaccinated and unvaccinated are going to enter the Philippines. On February 15th, that rule is going to change, but on February 10th to the 15th, they're going to have to go ahead and have these additional requirements to enter the Philippines. The unvaccinated are going to have that quarantine. Remember, we said they don't have to quarantine if you're vaccinated, but the unvaccinated from the 10th to the 15th have to stay 5 days in a base where they have the quarantine, and they're going to have that RT-PCR test to make sure they don't have the virus. And then after the 5 days, they have to go self-quarantine for 14 days. So the unvaccinated have all the requirements that the vaccinated have, plus these additional requirements. If unvaccinated for medical reasons, you must still follow the protocol of the unvaccinated. Also, for those days, there's a protocol from the 10th to the 15th of 3,000 people entering the Philippines that are unvaccinated a day. However, if you're vaccinated, that protocol, the 3,000, does not include yourself. So it's the 3,000 that is going into hotels for that 5-day quarantine. That's the limit of the people allowed in the country. However, on the 16th, it all changes. All changes. The way it's working right now is on the 16th, nobody will be allowed in the country unless they have the vaccination cards, the proof of the vaccination. So the unvaccinated will not be allowed in the country. On the 16th, Filipino citizens can still enter the country of the Philippines, but they must still go through that quarantine of the 5 days and the 14 days self-monitoring at home, and also that RT-PCR swab test. They must take that before going home. There's also conversation regarding the unvaccinated and the requirements to enter the country, because right now on the 16th there's no unvaccinated foreign nationals allowed in the country. However, they're talking about some changes, so stay tuned. There might be some changes regarding that. We'll report that, but at this time there's no unvaccinated foreign travelers coming on the 16th of February. Also, if you're a Filipino and you want to go travel abroad, you must purchase an additional requirement, and that is a health insurance for the duration of your stay. Also, you must check into the country that you're going to be flying into, because they also have requirements. For example, in America, once you get to America, you have to take the antigen test, and a lot of people are hoping in the Philippines they go to the antigen test also, because the results come within minutes, and it's, I think, cheaper too. But also you must check the requirements of the country you're traveling into. The reason why the Philippines wants the Filipinos to have this insurance policy is it doesn't want to be responsible if you get sick. Also, starting February 10th, there's going to be a 30-day visa. So if you're traveling from abroad, you're going to probably get that 30-day visa stamped in your passport. So you can stay in the Philippines for up to 30 days. So don't book your stay past 30 days if possible, or you have to renew that visa. However, if you're from Israel or Brazil, you have a 59-day visa. Like we said, starting February 16th, everybody from all the countries are going to be able to come to the Philippines, but they're going to have that vaccination, the double vaccination. They're going to have the card. So you got to make sure that your card is accepted in the Philippines. Also, like we mentioned, there's discussions regarding the vaccination cards, the easing up of the requirements of the vaccination card to enter to the Philippines. There's also an exemption from the vaccination card, and that is all minors 18 and below, or below 18, do not have to have the vaccination. Also, there's some people with a medical condition. They must have an original copy from the doctor of a medical certificate stating that they have a medical condition that they cannot take the vaccine. For example, if you have a medical condition that you just can't, like an allergy, you can't take that vaccine, you must have the original certificate from the doctors. You cannot have a photocopy or any kind of proof on your cell phone. You must have and present the original copy from the doctor. Also, if you're a diplomat from a foreign country and you're traveling with your family, you are exempt from having the vaccination card. So 48 hours before departure to the Philippines, you must have that RT-PCR test at the country from origin where you leave to go to the Philippines. Not in the Philippines, but the country that you leave to come to the Philippines. And what if you test positive for the coronavirus when you're leaving at the airport? You can't come to the Philippines. You must keep your result. You must go home and you must self-quarantine for 14 days. You must rebook your ticket. Rebook that ticket. Don't lose it. Rebook it, and you have to travel at a later date. If you take that test again and it's positive and you got a problem, you're going to have to not come. They won't allow you on the airplane probably, and they won't allow you in the Philippines. So you have to go to the doctors if you have no symptoms of the COVID. You have to have a medical clearance that there's no problems with you. You have to have a checkup from the doctor. You have to have a medical clearance. And if the doctors check you out and make sure that there's no symptoms, you're okay, they'll give you a certificate, and you're allowed to use that certificate to enter the plane to come to the Philippines. If you're traveling with children All children 4 years old and above need that RT-PCR swab test. All children 4 and above need the swab test. But the children don't need the vaccination. Don't get that mistaken with the vaccination. From under 18, they don't need to be vaccinated. But from 4 years old and up, they need the RT-PCR swab test. Also, we mentioned at the beginning of the show that these are temporary. They're subject to change. They could go easier in the requirements, or they could go back to the old days. We hope they don't go back to the old days. We want the country to open. We want the Philippines to be successful. And the country, the government, they mentioned that a lot of the COVID has spread from within. So the foreigners haven't been here. So a lot of the COVID that's in the Philippines have come from the Philippines. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the beautiful island of Boracay. It's gorgeous here. The coconut trees. Come to Boracay when you come to the Philippines. You won't regret it. Summer is arriving. It's beautiful. And we appreciate you hanging out with us today. Book your flight to the Philippines and book your flight to Boracay. Thank you so much. And summer's here soon. Take care, and we're gonna see you next time.